Hey, what's going on, guys? Let's talk about this situation that happened in Winder, Georgia. Yet a school shooting. The national media is all over it, as they would be, especially propagating all these politicians' narratives that guns are the problem. Of course, it's the problem. The AR-15 has already been determined, or an AR-15 platform has been determined to be the weapon. But I look at this situation and go, why are we not talking about the 14-year-old that did this school shooting? Like, is it not significant that a 14-year-old child decided to do that? And if he didn't use the AR, he would have used something else to create and conduct an act of violence against his peers. He kills two teachers and two students. He's in an algebra class. I imagine it recessed. They get outside of the classroom because you go class to class. The other class is about to begin. It gets locked down. He tries to get back into that classroom and the door's locked. They auto lock, supposedly. This classroom is auto locked. A student sees that he's trying to get back in the classroom, but sees the AR and doesn't let him back in. Thank God, because he likely saved a lot of lives in that specific classroom. He goes into another classroom, winds up killing two teachers, two students, and injuring 9 people. Now, thank God this school has school resource officers, which every school, look, if the mayor, the governor, the politician, the diplomat, everybody is surrounded by security. Your courthouse is surrounded by security. Your DMV might even have security. Why are we not securing our kids? Thank God this school in Winder, Georgia had school resource officers that rapidly responded and winded up getting the shooter to surrender. So, of course, this becomes a component to the narrative that guns are the problems, but we don't want to talk about the real problem, like likely the lack of father in the home, the breakdown of the family unit, and all the mental health issues this kid was going through. I just saw a news story of an 11-year-old killing 2 people that were likely relatives of his, including a former judge, I believe one of the victims was. Yesterday, they rolled up this kid who's 17 years old that ended up shooting this NFL football player in the city of San Francisco, and the mayor wants justice, but they're not sure if they're going to convict this kid and charge him as an adult, even though he was 17 when he shot this NFL football player, which is the only reason it's in the national media headlines, is because the guy was an NFL football player. In fact, the only reason the mayor actually cares is because it's an NFL football player. In the city of Chicago over July 4th weekend, which I know seemingly, Mike, it's like that was so long ago. I mean, that was in July. Here we are in the beginning of September. That was so long ago. Why are we talking about issues that took place over 30 days ago? Well, in the city of Chicago, during the weekend in the city, and the naysayers will say, well, Mike, it's just so heavily populated. Like, why aren't we talking about this? It's a school with only a couple thousand or a couple hundred people. We're talking about a city that has millions of people. Okay, let's look at the statistics. 109 people were shot in the city of Chicago in a weekend, 19 of which were fatally killed, including several children. What if I told you that one of those children was 8 years old? Would that matter? No, it wouldn't matter because nobody cares. The national media certainly doesn't care. And look, if you're listening to me, likely you get it. The national media is playing the game. They are literally propaganda arms for the specific politician they support. CNN, NBC, ABC, Kamala Harris, Fox News, Trump, sometimes. So when you look at this convolution of the national media, why is it important to highlight these things? It's because half of our country, likely over half of our country, especially the boomers, still look at the national media like everything they say is fact. And you might be on the bandwagon and go, well, Mike, there's nothing we could do about this, so I don't even care. We can't change the corrupt system. And so you might be in the camp of those that say, I don't care, that's why I'm not going to vote. I would say, respectfully, you're part of the problem. And when you look at all these statistics and they lead and correlate you to think that maybe that's why violence is up. Maybe that's why these shootings are up. Maybe that's why a 14-year-old walks into a school. Then that's the crux and the source of the problem. but we're focused on the lesion. We're not focused on the cancer underneath the lesion that's infecting the entire body, that's infecting the entire country. So we don't want to actually fix the problem. And it seems like a diabolical task, a diabolical plan. It is. It is. It starts with Marxism. And just me saying that is likely going to get this video suppressed. That's why I got my patreon.com/Mike Glover. Because, I mean, if you look into who Kamala Harris's dad was and how she was raised in an academic setting and her policies exactly that she's put out, you might come to that same conclusion. Well, how does Marxism have anything to do with a 14-year-old conducting a shooting in Winter, Georgia? It has everything to do with it. Because if I'm propagating Marxist ideology and the breakdown of the family unit, because I want it to break, I want it to fracture, because I want it to not do anything good in this country, because that's the problem. So is democracy, by the way. Then I'm going to spin that, use it for my political gain, and then you're going to be focused on what you think now is the problem, a gun. Do you think an AR is the problem? Do you think even the access to guns is the problem? Because we got guns everywhere. Is that the problem? Or more aligned with the 14-year-old's mental health, capacity for violence, the trauma he's experienced, and maybe the circumstances which led him to kill 2 students and 2 teachers. As a 14-year-old child, that should be more concerned with sports and girls than he should with shooting up a school. I don't know. It's just me. But I don't know. Tell me how you feel about it, because obviously I feel passionate about it. I'll tell you more how I feel about it on my Patreon that's not suppressed. Let's also talk about this headline this morning that I read reading AP, which is pretty good news overall. The Associated Press puts out pretty good news. But I read this, but let me first read you about what's called covert operations. It's an actual thing. Like, most people think it's just a way of talking because I say black ops, covert ops. It's an actual legal term. I Wikipedia'd it because we know the government's controlling Wikipedia. But if you go on Wikipedia and you put in covert operation, a covert operation or undercover operation is a military or police operation involving a covert agent or troops acting under an assumed cover to conceal the identity of the party responsible. Under U.S. law, the Central Intelligence Agency must lead covert operations unless the president finds that another agency should do so and informs Congress. The CIA's authority to conduct covert operations under the National Security Act of 1947, President Ronald Reagan issued Executive Order 12333 titled U.S. Intelligence Activities in 1984. This order defined covert action as special activities, both political and military, that the U.S. government could legally deny. Under Ronald Reagan in 1984, under that U.S. Intelligence Activities Act, they could deny. We know it, especially in the military and special operations, as Title 50 of the Code, Section 413. The CIA must have presidential finding issued by the president in order to conduct these activities. Enough. That's the legal jargon. What does it mean? Well, it means that there are a whole bunch of things that the CIA and other organizations that's approved by the president of the United States can do and deny, especially if compromised, especially if looks bad. Let's get to the origin of this story. In 2020, there was a failed coup attempt that took place from rogue Green Berets and indigenous elements that came out of Colombia. And the idea from the propaganda that was released, especially from President Maduro, who's a big scumbag. We just seized this $13 million airplane recently, actually yesterday, and we're looking at seizing more of his assets. Of course, the U.S. government, whether proxy, whether covert, whatever, wants Maduro to go away because he's a national security risk to the United States of America, especially when it comes to the agencies responsible for protecting America. Let's say the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, etc. But you better believe they're on our target deck. They're on our radar. We have assets allocated to deal with that. So when I read that 3 Green Berets were involved in a failed coup in Venezuela, and 2 of those Green Berets were paraded around, I thought it very interesting because I know how this crap works. One, these SF guys aren't going to go rogue for nothing. In fact, money is a part of that process. But I would venture to say that most GWAT vets, like if you're a GWAT vet, like me, you might have been offended by seeing contractors overseas working, making a lot of money and not being in uniform. At least that was the perspective from us. Actually, if you're a GWAT vet, I want to hear your opinion on this. Chime in the comments. Because I remember seeing like, not KBR, not like logistics guys, but seeing these guys who were former SEALs, former SF guys, former whatever. Now, if they retired, that was different. But if they still were like young like us and they weren't serving in uniform, we always thought that was weird. And we thought they're doing it for the money. And so if you're a GWAT vet, you didn't do anything for the money. You served because there was definitive purpose in you fighting for your country, given the circumstances that happened likely on 9/11, right? So you were invested differently. Your sense of purpose was different. So when this happened, immediately Pompeo comes out and says the US government had nothing to do with it. And Trump actually came out and said we had nothing to do with it. When Pompeo said we had, and I'm paraphrasing here, we had nothing to do with it. And not only did we have nothing to do with it, but if we did have something to do with it, it would have had a different outcome. I went, you had something to do with it. 100%. You had something to do with it. Because when the government comes out and makes a statement that they didn't have anything to do with anything, they had something to do with it. Or if we had something to do with it, it would have a different outcome. And these guys are amateurs. He's basically saying these guys are amateurs, which they're not amateurs. They're very experienced in counterterrorism, foreign internal defense, which is what this is. Counterterrorism and foreign internal defense, different from foreign internal defense. There are some FIT operations that you do where you just go train the people and they go out and operate and you facilitate or provide logistical support, mentorship, and then send them beyond the gate. But there's counterterrorism FIT where you train them, advise them, and then are hand in hand operating with them on target. You might even prioritize your capability and your experience and put them in the back of the stack. I mean, that's figuratively speaking, but also literally speaking. So here, they were trained up in Colombia by the Green Berets, and then former Green Berets, I'll be clear about that, and then brought into the country via the port where they're doing an amphibious operation. What I find odd about the amphibious operation is one of the dudes who was rolled up, his last name was Denman, and he's a former SF guy. And these guys are facing 20, or they're charged, they were charged and convicted and sentenced of 20 years in prison in Venezuela, which I find alarming. I find alarming that we allow negotiations with Russia to get a WNBA player who brings a weed pen into Russia in exchange for other hostages, including violent and dangerous human beings. And we don't care that two special operations guys got rolled up. And despite the circumstances, we don't care about them getting rolled up and put in federal prison in Venezuela. So Denman, when he gets rolled up, they're paraded on the shore of this port where they came in, supposedly. I think they had an infiltrator, somebody who knew that this was going to happen. He's in board shorts, a shirt that's collared, has his passport and his ID on him. Does that seem like a covert action? That's very suspicious to me. One, if he's doing an operation, period, he wouldn't have that on his person at all. So I don't know what's going on. This ex-Green Beret behind failed Venezuela raid released pending trial on weapons charge is the headline. So this ex-SF guy who winded up not being on the ground, his name's Jordan. He gets back to the States. Now he's charged with weapons charges, and he's supposedly released by a Manhattan judge. The federal government steps in and says, no, we don't want him to release, and they delay his release. Well, he finally gets released on bail or bond or whatever it is, and he's still pending these weapons charges. And the government is going all in on trying to prosecute this guy. Will they prosecute him because he's facing 10 to 20 years? The answer is yes. How will he get out? I think the only way he gets out is if he somehow gets Trump to pardon him. That's the only way, because they're going to make an example of this guy. And I ask myself the question, Why would they go after this dude that was involved in a failed coup, that was potentially involved in some kind of unattributed proxy covert action? Wouldn't they want to help him out if this was a covert action and he got rolled up? The answer is no. In fact, it's held to the no. If he got rolled up and compromised, they would want to lock him up as long as possible because he's talking. He's actually doing a documentary, supposedly, in this article, which is part of the reason he got bailed. I think it was $2 million. He got bailed by this producer of this documentary. And so I look at this and go, wait a minute. Do I recognize this guy? I do recognize him. He's a member of C-110. I believe he was a member of C-110, which was a sister organization called the Commanders in Extremist Force, which has been supposedly disbanded. That was a reinforced company of special operations guys that did counterterrorism, FID, hostage rescue, direct action, special reconnaissance, etc. I recognize him to be a person I know, to be a good guy who served in a lot of warfare. I mean, I read he has a lot of awards and served honorably in the military. And it's sad to see other Americans attacking him when you see the government going after him. Because the more I see the government go after somebody, the more I realize there's likely something that person knows and there's corruption involved, which is likely the case with this guy. So right now, Jordan is awaiting these weapons charges. These two guys are rolled up and in prison in Venezuela, and we are currently seizing assets, and I don't know what's going to happen. If any of you guys know anything about this situation or the circumstances of the situation, leave me some feedback in the comments, because I don't know a lot about it. I'm going down the rabbit hole on it, but I find it very interesting, especially as I see the U.S. government targeting this guy when we don't care that there are Americans fighting in the war on the front line in Ukraine against Russia, nor did we care that there were Americans fighting with the Kurds against ISIS. I just find it very interesting. There's a lot of investment on the U.S. government to put this guy away. Guys, I'm off to the underground on Patreon. I appreciate you guys. Till next time. Peace out.